Good afternoon, I'm glad to be here. I'm Jason Parker, I'm a flight dynamics analyst at Telesat. We do communication satellites, and that's not quite what I'm here to talk to you about today. In my job in space, I met this one woman who is an Ashbury grad, and she's putting together an aerospace company, and she's multi-million-dollar funded now. And I asked her how she got into space. And she said normally she started off in finance, and she was looking for something to energize her career, her business, and her dreams moving forward. And she got into the space world, and the more she met these people with hope and willingness to help, the more she wanted to be in space. So I'm bringing to you today, consider space. Because no matter if you want to be in business, a doctor, a lawyer, captain of industry, whatever it is you're thinking of, consider energizing your career into the final frontier, into the next thing. So I have about 500 seconds to do 22 slides. I couldn't cut it down because that would be cheating you of what's coming. I'm going to present what's coming in the space industry in the next 5, 10, 15 years. Because think of where you're going to be, where you want to be in your life, in your career in 5, 10, 15 years. And consider energizing yourself with space. So let's start close to home. There's the Artemis program. This is a lunar gateway and lunar landing. This is the replacement for the Apollo missions of the 60s, finally going back to the moon. Why did they do it? Because it was hard. The Apollo program, you can Google it, spun off 1 million products that you use every day. And they were solving problems that had never been solved, never even conceived of before. Why do they keep going to the moon? Because it presents problems that are way beyond what we think of every day, providing products that are beyond your initial imagination. That's what's going to be happening with this program. It starts off with a lunar gateway, a space station that sits between the two gravity wells of the moon and the Earth. It's going to have communications. It's going to have all the hardest things you could possibly think of and problems that we haven't thought of yet, to put people and air in a place that's one of the harshest places in the universe. Cislunar, that's an adjective meaning between the Earth and the moon. These are all the economies that happen between the Earth and the moon. This is a booming billion-trillion-dollar business that's coming. It's not only communications, it's mapping, it's data. We have the economy around the Earth, and now we're pushing for the economy around the moon. That creates data, delay, mapping, safety, life sciences. Here's a picture of the moon mission for China. China has a very strong moon plan. You can see from the picture here, we have communications that are put out in the diagram. We have solar power. We have in situ mining. So mining on another planet. The resource use. My favorite is one of the little white tubes there on the left. That is the in situ creation of rocket fuel. Once you get there, you got to be able to get home. How do you save people? How do you bring them back? How do they live? How do they not go insane? These are all psychological science issues that cross every boundary in every industry. 3D printed satellites. This is an interesting one that's rocking our world. So normally we have a satellite structure that's built like a car. It's a framework, much like the frames above your head. They hold up during extreme vibration, extreme loading. Well, they have a lot of gaps. If you built this satellite printed from the bottom up without having to get people in to plug in your wire harnesses, then if you built it like a cube of Swiss cheese with only the gaps, you can densify the satellite 10% of the size while retaining 25% of the payload. 3D printing. Reusable rockets. This picture is of the Electron rocket that lifted off November 4th. This did not successfully land, did not have its mid-air recovery of the booster. They were using parachutes and helicopter hooks. Did not work. I deliberately did not put on the SpaceX picture for this one. Landing a rocket is extremely hard, but when I went to school for aerospace engineering, it was considered impossible. The captains of industry at United Launch Alliance said it could not be done. And sure enough, SpaceX went ahead and they did it. We see these sorts of things. Open your imagination on this ride. Consider what cannot be done now and what you can do in the future. One of the greatest places, and I'll say it again a little later on, to consider what can be done is science fiction. Tintin used to take his rocket up to the moon, landed on the moon. Then, after solving whatever mystery he needed to, he'd get in his rocket and it would take off again because it landed vertically. That kind of inspiration in science fiction is what can be done. If you can imagine it, you can do it. You just have to figure out how. SpaceX Starship. I think we've all heard of this one. This is a massive moon rocket. This is unbelievably massive in the aerospace community. This would be normally considered impossible. You can see the two little arm structures at the top they call chopsticks. When that rocket lands on its pad, those chopsticks have to stabilize that. This is a fantastic undertaking that even 5 years ago would have been considered impossible. But this size rocket, you're looking at something that's like 30 stories tall. This is taller than all of the skyscrapers downtown. It's above 30 stories tall. And it's going to have to land. This sized rocket is required to drop off modules the size of school buses in Earth orbit, lunar orbit, in order to create a transportation system that puts down resources on the moon. Because the astronauts have to live in something. You're not going to bring up little cars for them to live in. You're going to have to create a module that's as large as a living room. This is what's required to live and to make actual things happen on the moon. And launching something the size of a school bus is enormous, and it's a fantastic undertaking. Let's shift gears a little bit, and we'll talk about space tourism. We've heard of that. Let's go one step farther. Suborbital private jets. It's not on the radar right now. We know it's coming. Seems completely abnormal. Why would you have a private jet that is a space plane? Well, there are yachts the size of this school that really, in my opinion, should not exist, but they do, and they are prolific around the Mediterranean. Never underestimate the luxury market and what is willing to be paid for. When we had our satellites first bringing high-speed internet to all over the world, the first market to sell out, the Mediterranean luxury yacht market, gone, sold out, and sold out many, many beams. Some of our geosatellites that sell entire beams to the Caribbean so that people can have internet and watch sporting events. The luxury market is fantastic. Never underestimate what's called the first mover effect. The people who are willing to pay $10,000 for the first 8K TV. That brings the industry along. So why would they do this? Not only for luxury, but can you consider the advantage of having the Concorde, when it used to fly London to New York, could do that trip in 1 hour. It would take you 7 hours on a normal plane. Space tourism planes like this can go from New York to Tokyo in 1 hour. Commercial space stations. I'm going to pause on this one quite a bit because this is where crazy stuff happens in the intersection of every industry in the world. It intersects here at these commercial space stations. They have made medical discoveries about growing crystals, how cells react to zero G. They can't be made. Those discoveries can't even be made on Earth. So if you're pushing boundaries and discovering new products and new drug treatments, consider space. Consider putting it on the space station. Consider owning a module on the space station. Consider hosting it. These are things that can revolutionize the economy and where you live. consider the law. There is no law in space. There are some treaties, but nobody has yet answered the question if a Russian captain shoots an American astronaut in space, there's no jurisdiction for trial. There's actually no jurisdiction if your space capsule bumps into that and causes a problem, or two satellites collide. Space law is its own brand new frontier. Satellite refueling. We have satellites that are up there and built for 15 years, so we put fuel on them for 15 years. But the communications don't run out in 15 years. A lot of those transponders go on for 20, 25. And they started creating refueling systems. That's worth a lot. And they create entire servicing now hubs where the drones can go out, service a satellite, come back. Or they can go out, attach on with a robotic arm, and give that satellite 10 extra years. That is a massive boost to the communications industry. Rocket cargo. I like how they put humanitarian missions in for this one. I don't know if you need to bring humanitarian aid within an hour, but basically anywhere on Earth, the US can launch and drop a rocket. In the future, you'd be able to do that. SpaceX could do that in the next 5-10 years. Land a rocket. That kind of cargo mission in 1 hour, in any location, no runway, so it's not a space plane. Just land on a flat field. That would be an amazing tactical advantage for humanitarian aid. Mobile high speed. I love that everybody here has a phone. This is a very plugged-in generation. But we're now at 8 billion people, and only half of them are urban. The other 4 billion are rural. And they don't have the kind of internet connection. Now, you take that one step further, now drive. If you drive across Canada, we have internet on your phones. But you take 10 minutes off the highway, you have nothing. This kind of communication not only opens up internet to the populations, but it also opens up internet in locations where you want to do business and where you want to do business in the future. This is a massive game-changing technology. Low Earth orbit satellites like SpaceX, Telesat's Lightspeed constellation, these are going to be bringing satellite internet. And it's not just to the people, it's to everywhere where you want to do business. And that's going to be game-changing for allowing the economy to spread out from the cities. 3D geospatial technology and machine learning. So, gaming. This is a picture of a digital twin of New Orleans, developed by Maxar and an AI company. This one's the most imaginative one on the list because it's being pushed as a gaming application. So, consider this. You could play a game in Ottawa, you tour around, and you can walk into this theater in Ashbury with your VR goggles and interact. So you could be at home. Well, that's interesting. But what if you could do your courses while being in the hospital, doing treatment, say for cancer treatment or broken legs or some sort of trauma? That is useful, okay. But consider the training opportunities. Consider how to enhance your business with a 3D model. I'm going to put a pin in that one. This goes with avatar technology. So this is an X Prize competition this year. All of these slides came from the Space News article I was going to do the last year, the most tech in the last year. And I got 22 of the top jumping points for our industry. Just going back to October and September. When you guys started this year, that's where all of these articles came from. On the bottom right are all of the links to all of these articles. If there's an industry you're interested in, you'll be able to get hold of these presentations. This one in particular they went into, this is a prize, a university competition almost, and industry. And so now they're creating robots that you can virtually manipulate. So let's go beyond your 3D model. You put on your goggles, you put on your gloves, and now you can manipulate your robot. Now you can get into places that you've never been before, that humans have never been able to access. And you can do it with tactile touch. That opens all kinds of doors. Where does it go? What do we use it for? It's up to you and your imagination. Now this is the second pin. I said put a pin in that 3D model. This is electro-optical imagery, radar, RF, and hyperspectral data. Okay, it's a lot of terms there. What that means is, you all know Planet Labs, you know Google Maps, satellite pictures that you get and you can find out where you're going. Well, there was an article in the financial news about a decade ago when Planet Labs set up and they started advertising that they could get repeat images around the world every day, every week, every month, whatever you needed, and you could buy that. And there was a huge uproar within the financial community because, as the financial journalist put it, if you know, and you've been watching the trucks coming out of the Coca-Cola plant, and you know that there's been 20% more trucks coming out of that Coca-Cola plant, you already know that quarter, they're going to say, we had 20% more sales. Had you purchased the stock ahead of that announcement, 20% on their year, that's a 5% or so boost in their stock price. You've now made the money. This is no longer speculation. This is data. You did not have to guess. That kind of imagery is extremely valuable around the world. All of a sudden, the articles ended about this sort of thing, and the biggest investors in space data are now the financial institutions. Consider different types of the spectrum. Radar, RF. You can get ground-penetrating radar, foliage-penetrating radar. You can find out the moisture content of a field. You can find out how good or how bad the crops are going to be in certain areas. If you know, and I mean know, that Vietnam's rice production has gone to zero and it's been wiped out, but you also know that Malaysia's rice production has doubled, you can now bet on the contracts. And it's not even a bet, you know, in the financial world. This goes back to imaging, data analytics. This is a picture of Russian convoy in Ukraine. Knowing where they are, knowing how big they are, you measure the shadows. You know exactly the size of their troop movements. These could be trucks from Amazon. Satellite information going into data, and the data analytics companies that make it happen with predictive data analytics and being able to mine this information is extremely valuable. Space situational awareness. We now have an industry around the Earth. We have an industry on its way to the moon. We'll have an industry around the moon and on the moon. Being able to track debris problems and eventually save them, recover them, repair them is another massive industry. Satellite apps. It's been announced that Apple is partnering with Globalstar. So now if you're in Algonquin Park and you're paddling your canoe and it overturns, you have emergency beacons. That didn't exist. That didn't exist a year ago. That was impossible a year ago. And the antennas and the developers made that happen. Quantum cryptography, laser satellite systems. This is one of my favorites. So the Apollo program, if you've watched some of the movies about it, their IBM computers would have filled this lecture hall. And now your phones have more computing power than those IBM computers. Well, today, University of Waterloo, quantum computers would fill this lecture hall. Where will that be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years? Those quantum computers can crack normal encryption in a minute. So my RSA token that we use in secure locations, that'll be cracked in an hour. Well, that's a problem. Quantum cryptography, which you can dig into, basically sends a quantum photon in space using lasers or fiber optics. The Chinese have done it using fiber optics for about 200 kilometers. But if you send it into space, you don't have the same number of repeaters. That photon lives longer. That moves along the system, keeps your data encrypted. People will pay a lot of money for encrypted data. Inter-satellite laser links. There was entire companies that proposed these solutions because high-speed trading between London markets and New York markets, if you can get there and you can buy your stock a millisecond before the other person using high-speed links, then you can make a lot of money. And the inter-satellite laser links get it there faster. Space computers. Could you imagine running a business in New York and your entire server farm was on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and there was a hostile environment between your business and your data? That's what you're finding in space now. Because in space, you want to be able to compute what you need to compute next to your data. You don't want to have to send all your information back to Earth and then have it in space. But computers do not react well in a high radiation environment. And space is deadly. Just existing in space is deadly. Computers even more so. So computers are being developed in order to create the outer net. This will be servers and basically an entire internet outside of the fiber cables that run under the ocean. The fiber cables run your internet. But being able to take those fiber cables and bring them to inter-satellite laser links out in space will be a game changer. How does that economy run? We'll see. Spacesuits, biokinetic products, sneaker foam. These just outfitting a human to exist in a toxic environment of space has created all kinds of biokinetic products and sneakers that you currently wear from the Apollo program. And this will boost the next 10 or 15 years because people love to pay for something that they internalize, that they wear themselves. All right. Consider, if you're interested in space, consider just keeping an eye out, Google it up, and keep an eye out for these think tanks. Reports are published every year. Finally, consider you. This is a picture of a technology starter, multi-million-dollar technology starter. This could be you. Consider space in your imagination, in your future.